The American dubstep scene didn't randomly pop up one day. There's a deep history behind its origins and key players who have been around since day one, building it up from nothing into the giant commercial business it is today. One of those key players is Excision. He has made enormous contributions to the American dubstep scene over the last 2 decades, both musically and business-wise. He's actually been around so long that he was one of Skrillex's main inspirations when he began making electronic music. In this video, we'll be dissecting the career of Excision and the influence he has had on the modern dubstep scene.
C'est le X de Excision. X.
My name is Jeff.
Jeff Abel was born in 1986 in Kelowna, British Columbia, which is a small picturesque Canadian city that's about 170 miles northeast of Vancouver. At just 2 years old, he was in a car wreck that gave him tinnitus, which seems to be a rite of passage for dubstep producers, so it was almost as if he was born to do this. All jokes aside, this does play a crucial role in the story of Excision's come up, but we'll get into that later. His tinnitus is why he's so adamant about everyone wearing earplugs at his shows, even though in his Reddit AMA he said that tinnitus is, quote, not that bad. Anyways, growing up in Canada, he was naturally a hockey fan.
Excision is like the biggest hockey fan.
He also enjoyed playing video games, with his favorite game being Mega Man X for the Super Nintendo. He has never specified if this game had any influence on the Excision branding, but it does make me wonder. Mega Man X has very robotic themes throughout, which is something we often see in Excision's branding, and maybe the X in Mega Man X gave him an affinity for the letter that now represents his project. But that's all just speculation. As a kid, he had dreams of growing up to become a paleontologist so that he could excavate dinosaur bones. Obviously, he traded in that dream to be a dubstep producer, but he still shares his love for dinosaurs through Excision and Lost Lands, which we'll get to later in the video. Aside from playing Super Nintendo and dreaming of paleontology, he also took up an interest in music at a young age.
I grew up listening mostly to metal and hip-hop, which was kind of a strange combination. Metal always had a special place for me, just hearing like the heavy riffs of the guitars mainly. And hip-hop, I was always down with like the tempo and the flow of the beats.
Once he was a little bit older, he started to get a taste for electronic music when he discovered The Prodigy's The Fat of the Land album, which came out when he was 11 years old. In an interview, he once said that he loved the album, but he couldn't find anything else even close to it until 2005 when he was in college. At the time, he was studying business at the University of British Columbia, which was when he discovered Vexed and their album called Degenerate, which would change his life forever.
I came across Vexed, which was categorized as drum and bass on this one website, and they were a really heavy, almost industrial sound that people called dubstep, I guess, but it wasn't really dubstep at that point. It was just what they wanted to make.
After discovering Vexed, he immediately started producing and DJing, and he decided to drop out of college soon after, getting a job as a dishwasher to support himself in the meantime. He said that his parents weren't very happy with his decision, but they regained some faith in him when they saw him putting in 12 hours of work every day to improve his skills. In a quote from an interview, he said, "I didn't know a single other DJ for over a year and didn't meet any other producers until I was touring in 2007. It was 2005 when I started, and although the internet had a few places you could read up on various techniques, it definitely wasn't like today where there's a YouTube tutorial for everything. Learning how to produce the sounds of your imagination is a long, arduous process that I wouldn't recommend to anyone who isn't willing to sacrifice a big chunk of their life." And you know what else used to be a long and arduous process? Learning how to make incredible visuals. But luckily, Banger Show is today's sponsor, and they're here to help. Banger Show makes creating professional-grade visuals fun and easy. You can get started by picking an audio reactive background and start adding whatever 3D elements you want. Want a dancing monkey? Have at it. Or how about a cat in a banana suit? You can do that too. And you can always keep things simple and tasteful, like a 3D animation of your logo if that's what you prefer. Next, you can mess with various elements like hue and saturation, various glitch effects, and more. You can even adjust camera animations like point of view and how fast the view of the scene moves around. Banger Show also gives you ready-made templates if you need a little inspiration for your next video. Banger Show is a young company, but they have quickly gained popularity among rising producers like Effin, Sodown, Joaquin, and Burnout, who all use Banger Show as a way to promote their music on social media. Banger Show offers 2 different pricing tiers to meet your needs, and if you use my affiliate link in the description, I receive a cut from every sale, which will help the channel tremendously. The more money I make from the channel, the more time I can dedicate to it, which means more frequent uploads and better content. So if you're a producer looking to spice up the visual representation of your brand, Banger Show is the perfect solution. Now, remember that car wreck that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the one that gave him tinnitus at just 2 years old? Well, when he became an adult, he received a small settlement from that accident all those years back. That money allowed him to buy a good computer and studio monitors, and it was enough for him to quit his job and cover his living expenses while he fully focused on music. Once he was working on music full-time, he was able to progress quickly, and in 2006, he released his first mix called Dubstep Summer. The following year in 2007, he released his second mix called Rotten Dubstep, which served as his inspiration for his first label, Rotten Recordings, which he launched at the end of 2007 with his label co-founder, Downlink. As a quick side note, I'm not going to dive too deep into Rotten Recordings because I could make an entire video out of that, but I do want to emphasize the impact that Rotten has had in shaping the modern bass music scene. Many renowned artists have released on Rotten over the years, such as Liquid Stranger, Seven Lions, Wave Dash, Ray Volpe, Space Laces, Subtronics, and so many more. Like a lot more. After starting the label, he released his first original track called No Escape, and by this point, he already had enough notoriety to start touring, which is pretty crazy to think about, seeing that he had just begun learning how to produce 2 years prior. For the following 2 years, he continued to tour and release singles on Rotten, slowly building the Excision project from the ground up. Keep in mind that dubstep hadn't blown up in the US at that point, so everything that he was doing was considered very underground. However, one factor that helped him tremendously early on was getting booked to play at Shambhala in 2008. Shambhala is a popular Canadian festival that many would consider the best festival in the world, and Excision has become a mainstay artist at the festival as he has played nearly every year since that 2008 set. He played the festival 10 years straight from 2008 to 2017, and he also played in 2019, 2022, 2023, and will play this year as well. He utilized his Shambhala opportunities to the fullest by posting his Shambhala sets on SoundCloud every year from 2008 until 2016 when he got too busy with Lost Lands and his other ventures, but the mixes were fan favorites. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's take things back to the late 2000s. Somewhere around that 2007 to 2008 time period, a young Sonny Moore discovered Excision and was inspired to start making dubstep, so he launched a side project called Twips, while his main project at the time was just called Sonny. Twips was the precursor to Skrillex, which is what he changed his name to when he released the Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites EP, and the rest is history. Skrillex is often considered to be the main dubstep pioneer within the United States, and while he is the one who really brought it into the mainstream, Excision was one of the main artists doing the dirty work necessary to help facilitate Skrillex's meteoric rise. I do want to note that Excision wasn't Skrillex's only influence in regards to dubstep, but he has publicly said that Excision was one of his main influences, and I don't think that Excision gets enough credit for the influence of his work in those early years. By 2009, Excision released his first EP on Rotten called Boom, followed by the Aftermath EP and Hypothermic EP, as well as a bunch of singles throughout the rest of the year. His reach was starting to grow both internationally and within North America, though he still had a long way to go. Around this time, electronic music was starting to gain more traction in the States, with artists like Pendulum, Deadmau5, and Nero leading the charge. Pop music was beginning to adopt a more dance-oriented style as well, which helped warm up listeners to the idea of full-blown dance music. In 2009, radio airwaves were dominated by 4-on-the-floor beats with tracks like LaRue's Bulletproof, Boom Boom Pow by the Black Eyed Peas, Flo Rida's Right Round, and just about every single one of Lady Gaga's hit tracks. The musical landscape was rapidly turning away from the rock-influenced style that was so popular in the 2000s, and electronic music was being primed for its big break, though some more dominoes did need to fall. The following year in 2010, Excision's reach had grown and he was getting booked more frequently for major events such as EDC Las Vegas, which he played for the first time that year. However, his popularity shot up in 2011 when he released his debut album called X-Rated on Mousetrap, deadmau5's record label. The choice for Excision to release on Mousetrap may seem odd, however, it's not as crazy as it might seem. Skrillex had released his Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites EP on Mousetrap just 1 year prior, which, as we all know, was a smash hit, and it served as many people's introduction to dubstep. Although the EP actually has more electro house tracks than dubstep tracks, but that's a conversation for another day. To the general public, almost any electronic track was called dubstep back then, so let's just roll with that. Releasing on Mousetrap exposed Excision to an entirely new listener base, and he also went on tour as support for deadmau5 on his Meowington's Hacks tour, which helped him gain new fans and accelerate his growth. Now, remember how I said that he was a huge fan of Mega Man X as a kid? Well, one of the tracks on the album is called 8-Bit Superhero, and it samples music from the game. Specifically, the soundtrack that plays during the level where you have to fight Storm Eagle, one of the bosses in the game. That same year, he released the Existence EP, which contained Existence VIP, a collab with Downlink, which became massively popular.
Power up the Bas Canyon.
One of my friends showed me this song at school, which was my introduction to Excision, and it seemed like pretty much everyone at my school knew that song. Most people were just learning about dubstep at the time and didn't really know many dubstep artists outside of Skrillex and Flux Pavilion, so Excision really burst onto the scene with that track, at least that's how it appeared to me. Another interesting thing that happened in 2011 was that he got to open for Korn at the Hollywood Palladium after appearing on their Path of Totality album. I couldn't find footage of the show, but there are DVD copies of the Hollywood Palladium Path of Totality show for sale online, which has Excision's performance on it, just in case any of you want to buy that.
Korn, the Path of Totality Tour, live at the Hollywood Palladium, featuring revolutionary live performances with Skrillex, 12th Planet, Dancing, Downlink, Excision, Flinch, and Kill the Noise.
Though I'm not totally sure how much of an impact that had on his career as a whole, but I would imagine he converted some fans of that show since dubstep and metal share a fair amount of similarities. All in all, with the release of his debut album, the tour with deadmau5, and everything else I just mentioned, I think it's fair to say that 2011 was his definitive breakout year, though obviously much more growth was yet to come.
It's already gone so far beyond my original expectations of just trying to get by and pay rent. Things have just really taken off, especially in the last year where dubstep in North America has grown to be almost mainstream, but still underground enough that it can be called cool.
In 2012, he embarked on the X Tour, unveiling the X Vision stage, which was the first rendition of his ever-changing unique stage designs. That was an interesting year for Excision because he started what is arguably one of the most unique electronic acts of all time, Destroyed. The name was inspired from a 1994 comic book, and the idea was to create a futuristic robot band that played electronic music live. Excision teamed up with Pendulum's drummer, KJ Saka, as well as Downlink to form the trio.
We were just kind of bored of always playing DJ sets, so we wanted to try something different.
The first track they released is called Destroyed 1 Raise Your Fist, which was a collaboration with Space Laces, who was a common collaborator with Destroyed, and he has also played a big part in Excision's career, but we'll dive deeper into that later in the video. The following year in 2013, Destroyed released their debut album before playing their first ever show in San Francisco, followed by shows in New York, Buffalo, Tempe, and Chicago, as well as various festival appearances. They continued on into 2014 full steam ahead, making their EDC Las Vegas debut, as well as playing massive festivals like Spring Awakening, Global Dance, and Electric Zoo. That was their most active year, as they played a total of 24 shows, and they have only ever played 2 shows since then, one in 2016 at Ultra, and their final show in 2017, which we'll talk about in a bit. During Destroyed's glory days in 2013 and 2014, Excision was busy taking his stage design and performances to a new level. In 2013, he unveiled his new stage setup called the Executioner that paired 3D mapped animation and lighting that Excision was controlling himself while simultaneously DJing. The setup also featured a 100,000 watt PK sound system that was so powerful that it literally shattered light bulbs and alcohol bottles on a few different occasions. Here's a quote from Excision about the sound system. Our 100,000 watt PK system is really dialed in for dubstep with 40 subwoofers putting out pure bass. It can do serious damage to venues, especially the smaller ones. The bass in small venues bounces off the back wall and double the bass in some places. On many occasions on a Monday or Tuesday night, we would explode thousands of dollars of alcohol bottles. Venues also don't like it when huge chunks of drywall fall from their ceiling at every drop, or when all their light bulbs explode. Excision toured with the Executioner stage from 2013 to 2014, and he had a bit of a bad experience on tour during an off day in South Carolina in 2014, which he talked about in his Reddit AMA, saying, "A few weeks ago, we had a day off. We were in the middle of nowhere at a South Carolina hotel. A few of us decided to hit the pool/hot tub. While in there, a 70-year-old man opens up the door to the pool room and lies down on the floor. He pulls out his DSLR camera and just starts taking pictures. We tell him to fuck off, and he says, okay, then just keeps taking pictures. He literally walks up within 2 inches of our faces to get a close-up of this awesome zit I had that day. After about 15 minutes of ripping on him and him trying to get us to attack him while he takes pics/films us, we leave and he follows us all the way to the bus. Clearly a Class A troll trying to get us to hit him so he can sue us. We later found out he had a window looking out to where our bus was parked and saw us walk in, thinking we were rich rock stars coming out of that tour bus. It was my first taste of what the life of people who are actually famous must feel like. Fuck that shit. There's a reason why my face is hidden in almost all of my press photos." He didn't release much music in 2013 and 2014, probably due to his brutal schedule between all of the Excision and Destroyed shows. Plus, he was probably busy finalizing his next album that would release the following year. However, in 2014, he discovered Dion Tamer, who was only 14 at the time, and he would go on to be Excision's protege. Dion had remixed an AFK track, and AFK sent it to Excision, who immediately reached out to Dion.
So he sent it to Excision, and then Excision came back to me like, yo, you're dope, we gotta start doing stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the whole crazy link. It's all because of Jimmy AFK. Shout out to Jimmy, because he's one of the best guys out there for sure.
Over the next couple of years, Excision helped Dion hone his skills, and he even taught him how to DJ before Dion really broke into the scene in 2016. Dion even lived with Excision for a bit in Canada when he was making the transition to being a full-time touring artist.
I went to Canada for a bit, living at Excision's spot.
And then how did you get closer and closer to Excision over time? Because he's like your best friend and mentor now.
Yeah, it's crazy. We did one tune, and after that he flew. He actually had a connection in Amsterdam. So I got breakfast with him, or dinner for me, breakfast for him. I remember that. At the airport, that was the first time I met him. And we were just talking, and my dad was there too to pick me up. And he was like, we should get Dion out to Canada, Kelowna, where he lives. And a couple months later, we did. My parents came with me, flew out to Canada to Excision's house, and I stayed there for a little bit. That was really cool. And we made a lot of tunes that week. And yeah, just slowly started growing from there, I guess. Started visiting more, and started playing shows with him. Kind of grew from that.
In 2015, Excision made his Monster Cat debut when he released Bring the Madness with Pegboard Nerds, and he also released Robo Kitty with Downlink on Downlink's record label called Uplink Audio. But the highlight of the year was when he released his second album, Codename X, which featured his first two collaborations with Dion Tamer, who was only 15 years old at the time. Following the album release, he went on tour featuring a new stage called The Paradox. The Paradox featured a 150,000 watt PK sound system, which was 50% more power than the light bulb shattering Executioner setup, and it also featured a drastically improved visual experience. It was also customizable, allowing 16 different configurations so that it could be modified to fit each venue perfectly, whereas the Executioner stage was the same every time. The stage took multiple years of planning, with Excision working with a Nashville-based mechanical engineering firm and a structure and engineering team from Maryland to pull it off. Unfortunately, all of the rigorous touring from the past few years had left Excision with lower back pain, so he decided to cut his touring pace in half, and he also started to hit the gym 5 days a week to strengthen his back. Speaking about this, he said, "It's a bit sad to realize I'm only human and not a super-powered robot dinosaur from outer space, but I'm proud to now be in the best shape of my life and tour the world rattling bones and melting faces for many years to come."
Everybody wanna be a bodybuilder. Right. So nobody wanna lift this heavy ass weight. Go! I do it though! Yeah!
In 2016, he released his third album, Virus, which featured a whopping 5 collaborations with Dion Tamer, as well as his biggest track with Space Laces, Throwin' Elbows. He continued on through the rest of the year, touring with the Paradox stage and playing major festivals as usual. However, behind the scenes, he had been gearing up for his biggest project ever. In 2017, he announced that he would be launching his own bass music festival that year called Lost Lands, featuring an absurd 500,000 watt sound system. Excision had a lot of special things planned for the first year of the festival, the first of which being his debut Detox set. His Detox sets feature more down-tempo and experimental bass music, and they serve as a creative outlet for Excision to explore outside of his usual heavy-hitting dubstep. One surprise artist on the lineup was Destroyed, who would be performing their last show ever. To be clear, they never said outright that it was their final show, but with everything Excision has going on these days, I think it's unlikely we'll ever see a return, but I may eat my words one day. Unfortunately, Destroyed's performance was cut short due to the stage catching on fire mid-performance.
Please everyone back up from the stage. Please everyone take 2 steps back from the stage, please.
With the success of Lost Lands, Excision decided that it was time to launch his second festival, Bas Canyon, a 3-day festival at the famous Gorge Amphitheater in Washington. It took place just 3 weeks before the second year of Lost Lands and has remained a favorite among bass music lovers ever since. Excision is no stranger to throwing his own shows, as he was already throwing his famous Thunderdome shows at the Tacoma Dome before he got into throwing festivals. He was even a promoter before the Excision project took off back in the mid-2000s, so he's actually quite experienced when it comes to the business side of events.
Throwing shows kind of shows you there actually is money to be made in DJing and producing, because you're throwing the show, you put all this effort into promoting these artists, you get X amount of people out to the show, you have all these costs and you pay, and at the end of the night you might walk away with a few $100, but the DJ you just booked is walking away with $1,000, and he came and partied and had fun and made way more money than you did working your butt off. So why can't I be that guy, you know?
He also released his 4th album in 2018 called Apex, which featured some big-time collabs with artists like Sullivan King, Illenium, and of course the regulars Space Laces and Dion Tamer. The track with Illenium called Gold, which is one of the biggest tracks on the album, was almost never released. Excision spoke about this in an interview saying, "This project was a monster to make happen. There are so many things the world doesn't see behind the scenes. Lots of different people involved and all the industry stuff that can sometimes hold things back. Getting the vocal licensing contract signed for this one almost led to this track never seeing the light of day, but luckily we were able to figure everything out." In 2019, Excision released 2 EPs, one with Dion Tamer and another with Wooly, who had sort of become his next protege after Dion. He also released a single with Wooly and Seven Lions on Seven Lions' record label called Ophelia Records. At his Thunderdome show in early 2020, he debuted yet another stage design, this time being called the Evolution, which was the follow-up to the Paradox design. For Lost Lands that year, he hosted a poll where fans could vote for the artists that they wanted to see at the festival in 2020, but unfortunately, Lost Lands never happened in 2020 due to COVID, but in its place, Excision hosted an online streaming festival called Couchlands. The event was hosted multiple times throughout the year, with each rendition being called an episode. Before Excision's set for Couchlands Episode 3, he announced that he was launching a new record label called Subsidia. Excision said that Subsidia is more than just a record label. Visually and thematically, it's a futuristic haven city for those who love bass. While the rest of society is sheltered in a simulated world that delivers all of their wants and needs, Subsidians have chosen to be free and are empowered to create their own experiences in the real world. Subsidia released its first compilation album soon after, featuring a whopping 62 tracks from up-and-comers like Nightpunk and Viperactive, as well as some long-established artists, including Excision himself. The label is extremely active, already having released hundreds of tracks to date, and their reach continues to grow. By the summer of 2021, Excision was back to playing shows, and he released a few more singles that year, including collaborations with Subtronics, Dion Tamer, Kai Wachi, and Sullivan King. When 2022 rolled around, Excision was ready to debut a new flagship event called the Excision Coliseum, a 2-day event at the Hampton Coliseum. Though he didn't stop there, as he also rolled out his third festival, Paradise Blue. It's a 3-day festival that takes place in an intimate setting at a resort in Cancun, with stages on the beach as well as by the pool. Aside from all of the new events in 2022, he also released his 5th and most recent album, called Onyx. All in all, 2022 was a great year for Excision, though he did get a little bit of heat on the internet when Getter responded to one of Excision's tweets saying, "Damn, you still ripping off Space Laces, man?" Getter, who is good friends with Space Laces, went on to claim that a lot of Space Laces collabs with Excision are entirely produced by Space Laces. Excision responded by saying, "Every track that I've made with Space Laces lists him as a full collab artist, not a feature. We've worked together for years, and he's been to my place and worked with me in my studio many times, and I've been to his home in Louisville to work with him." The Destroyed album is entirely a collab album except for 2 solo songs, one by me and one by Downlink. Space Laces was a collaborator on 5 of the 10 tracks. It's pretty obvious he was not on the other 5 tracks, as they sound nothing like him. Space Laces is an absolute legend who is amazingly talented at creating unique sounds. If you listen to the Getter track with him Choppas, it sounds like Space Laces. Space Laces' sounds will dominate any collab he makes because they are dope AF. Titans, the song in question, is a collab between Wooly and I, the title track for our EP Titans, entirely made in my studio. Our inspiration for this track was Mirror, my collab with Dion from 2016. Both Titans and Mirror are 128 BPM house tracks that go halftime. To put this all to bed, Space Laces has never ghost produced for me. He's been given full credit as a collaborator in every track he's worked on. We even have more collabs on the way that I played at Bas Canyon, and we are stoked to share with you all soon. Space Laces chimed in on the matter saying, "For the record, I don't do any ghost producing, and I don't have any interest in ruining anyone's career. All the songs I've worked on with Excision, I'm a credited artist. That being said, I notice a lot of people trying to replicate songs of mine. However much of that is coincidence or confirmation bias, I'll never know. But I can't get mad for people taking inspiration. On a good day, it's flattering. On a bad day, it just feels like a broken record in an industry where I often feel disregarded or taken advantage of. At the end of the day, I just want the recognition for the work that I've done. Anything between me and Jeff, I'd rather handle personally and not in public. I appreciate the friends who have my back, and thank you for always sticking up for me. I appreciate it more than you could know." All I have to personally say on the matter is that I do think Space Laces is brutally underrated, and I would even go as far as saying that he's the best dubstep producer in the world, and has been for many, many years. Excision even said the same thing in his Reddit AMA 10 years ago, so if you're not on the Space Laces train, you should get on it because his music is absolutely nuts.
So delicious!
But that's enough Space Laces fanboying for today, so let's get back to Excision. In 2023, Excision released a slew of new music, including 9 singles, as well as the Titans EP with Wooly. He also pulled off yet another round of all of his flagship events and festivals, with Lost Lands having its biggest year yet. But the biggest part of his year came when he got engaged to his longtime girlfriend, Emma. So far in 2024, he has released 3 singles, and in February, he pulled off another successful 2-day run of the Thunderdome, where he even played alongside Melodeath, the duo of Sudden Death, and Marshmello. He also debuted some wild new visuals, including an angry Shrek, which I'm sure you've all seen by now. The new visuals were so crazy that they caught the attention of Kanye West, who posted a screenshot of Excision's Instagram on his own Instagram with the caption, "Thank you for letting me know about these companies in my comments section." He did post screenshots of some other visual companies and artists, including Anima, but the world of Excision and Kanye West colliding was definitely not something that I had on my 2024 bingo card. A few months later in April, Excision had a big announcement posting that he and his fiancée are having a baby in October of this year, and the baby is rumored to go back-to-back with Excision and DJ Diesel at Lost Lands next year, but nothing has been confirmed yet. Aside from that, he just pulled off his third successful year of Paradise Blue, and he has a bunch of tour dates scheduled for the rest of the year, all leading up to his two biggest events of the year, Bas Canyon and Lost Lands. Excision has been a staple of the dubstep community ever since it blew up in the US in 2010, and he was one of the few artists repping it when dubstep was totally underground. He's never really been the most hyped artist. Instead, he has taken more of a slow and steady road, and it has served him well. I do think that his historical contributions to the American dubstep scene are often overlooked, or perhaps they're just overshadowed by his enormous influence in this current era, both as an artist and a businessman. It does seem that he has been growing into that business role more and more in recent years, and it makes me curious as to how his influence will grow as we move forward. I'm not sure what the future will hold, but I can imagine that Excision will have many more surprises in store for the dance music community.